This is IMT News.
देखती आंखों सुनते कानों आपको रशंदा जाहिद का सलाम। आप देख रहे हैं IMT न्यूज फ्रॉम लंदन। मुख्तार पानीवाला एक मेहनती, हमदर्द और खिदमत खल्क के जज्बे से सरशार शख्सियत हैं। अपनी जिंदगी के तजर्बात और जद्दोजहद के जरिए उन्होंने ये साबित किया कि अगर नीयत नेक हो तो हर मुश्किल आसान हो जाती है। वो बरसों से माजूर अफराद की खिदमत में मसरूफ अमल हैं और इनके मसाइल को समझकर इनके हुकूक के लिए जद्दोजहद कर रहे हैं। उन्होंने मुख्तलिफ फलाही इदारों और समाजी तंजीमों के साथ मिलकर दर्जनों ऐसे मंसूबे मुकम्मल किए जो माजूर अफराद की जिंदगी में आसानी लाएं। इनकी रहनुमाई में दर्जनों लोगों को व्हील चेयर, आला समात, छड़ी, माली मदद और मुख्तलिफ तरबियती मौके फराहम किए गए हैं। मुख्तार पानीवाला की जिंदगी एक मिसाल है कि किसी भी कम्युनिटी की खिदमत दिल से की जाए तो तब्दीली जरूर आती है। उन्हें न सिर्फ यूनिवर्सल मेमन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बल्कि पूरी मेमन कम्युनिटी फख्र से देखती है। मुख्तार पानीवाला की मुतासिर कुन सवाने उम्री कई अकसाद पर मुश्तमिल है। देखते रहिए और हमारे साथ जुड़े रहिए। आइए देखते हैं पार्ट 1।
Hey there, and welcome to today's episode. I'm really glad you're joining me because we're diving into a topic that's both personal and important: the real life challenges faced by blind people and how society often underestimates us. My name is Mukhtar Pani Wala, president of the Disabled Wing of Universal Memon Organization in Jamnagar, India. And as a blind person myself, I've lived through every challenge we'll talk about today. This isn't just theory for me, it's my life. And I want to share my story along with the experiences of many others, so we can break down stereotypes and see the world a little differently. Let's start with something that happens all the time: being underestimated. If you're blind, you know exactly what I mean. People assume you can't do basic things: cook, travel alone, use a phone, or even have a career. It's not just strangers either. Sometimes it's teachers, employers, or even friends and family. There's this underlying belief that blindness makes you less capable, less independent, or even less intelligent. And that's just not true. What strikes me about this is how much harder you have to work every single day just to prove you're equal. I remember so many times when people doubted me. At school, teachers would sometimes give me easier assignments, thinking they were being kind. But what that really did was hold me back. In the workplace, I've had to prove myself over and over again just to be given the same responsibilities as others. It's exhausting, honestly, but it's also taught me resilience. I've learned to speak up, to advocate for myself, and to show people what I can do, not just for me, but for everyone who faces these same barriers. There's another layer to this, and it's the feeling of being treated like a second-class citizen. Sometimes it's subtle, like being left out of conversations or decisions. Other times it's more obvious: being passed over for promotions, not being invited to social events, or having people talk about you as if you're not even there. It's about dignity and respect, and the right to live life on your own terms. I keep coming back to this idea: everyone deserves to be seen for who they are, not just for what they can or can't see. Now let's talk about relationships and marriage, because this is a big one. There's a stereotype that blind people can't have normal relationships, or that if we do get married, it's some kind of miracle. I've heard people say things like, "Wow, you found someone who loves you even though you're blind?" As if love is reserved only for the sighted. That's not just offensive, it's dehumanizing. I want to be clear: blind people want the same things as anyone else: companionship, love, family, and the chance to build a life with someone. I'm a married blind person myself, and I have a daughter who is also married and has a son. My life is proof that blind people can have families, raise children, and experience all the joys and challenges of life just like anyone else. But even today, when people hear about my marriage or my family, they sometimes react with surprise or even disbelief. They might say things like, "That's so inspiring," or "It's amazing that you found someone." But think about what that really means. It's like saying, "We didn't expect you to have a normal life." It turns a personal milestone into a public spectacle. This connects to a bigger issue: being underestimated and having to prove yourself, not just in work or school, but in every part of life. When society expects less from you, it's easy to start expecting less from yourself. Some blind people talk about feeling like they have to be superhuman just to be seen as equal. You have to excel, overcome, and inspire just to be treated with basic respect. That's a heavy burden to carry, but it's also a motivation to keep pushing forward. Let's talk about some of the practical challenges too. Getting around the city can be tough. Public transport isn't always accessible, and sometimes you have to rely on strangers for help. Shopping is a whole adventure. Labels, prices, and signs are all visual. Technology has helped a lot with screen readers and apps that describe the world, but there are still gaps. And then there are the little things like pouring a cup of tea or matching clothes that sighted people never think twice about. But here's what's interesting. The biggest barriers aren't always physical or technological. Often the hardest challenges are social and attitudinal. When people underestimate you or treat you as less than, it chips away at your confidence. When you're left out of conversations or decisions, it's not just inconvenient, it's isolating. That's why community is so important. Being able to connect with others who share similar experiences makes a huge difference. There are organizations, support groups, and online forums where we can share tips, ask questions, and just feel understood. Education is another area where these attitudes show up. Teachers might lower their expectations, assuming a blind student can't keep up. Or they might avoid giving challenging assignments, thinking they're being kind. But what that really does is limit opportunities and reinforce the idea that blindness equals inability. With accessible materials and a little creativity, blind students can thrive. But they need to be given the chance. Work is similar. I've seen so many talented blind people passed over for jobs or promotions, not because they can't do the work, but because someone assumes they can't. The reality is, with the right tools and training, blind people can excel in almost any field. Law, technology, education, you name it. The only real barrier is society's willingness to give us a fair chance. Social life isn't immune either. Blind people are sometimes excluded from group activities, not because they can't participate, but because others assume it would be too hard or awkward. I've heard stories of people not being invited to weddings or parties because the hosts thought it would be too difficult for them to get around. Imagine how that feels, not just left out, but left out because of an assumption. There's also a lot of advocacy happening. Blind people and our allies are working to change laws, improve access, and raise awareness. Things like tactile paving on sidewalks, audible crosswalk signals, and accessible websites don't just happen by accident. They're the result of hard work and persistence. But real change comes when society as a whole starts to see blind people as equals, not as exceptions. I want to pause for a second and just reflect on independence. There's a myth that blind people can't live on their own, work, or raise families. But the reality is, with the right training and tools, we can do almost anything. Technology has made a huge difference. Screen readers, accessible apps, and adaptive devices open up new possibilities every day. But the biggest change needs to happen in our attitudes. Let's not forget that blindness isn't always total. Many people who are legally blind have some usable vision. Others might have lost their sight later in life, which comes with its own set of challenges. Each person's experience is unique, and their strategies for coping and thriving are just as diverse. I'm starting to see a pattern here. The biggest barriers blind people face aren't about vision, they're about perception. When we underestimate someone, treat them as less than, or act surprised by their achievements, we're reinforcing a system that holds them back. But when we listen, learn, and treat people with respect, we open up a world of possibilities. So, what does all this mean for us? It means we need to challenge our own assumptions. We need to see blind people not as miracles or exceptions, but as people. People with strengths, weaknesses, dreams, and the right to live life on their own terms. We need to celebrate achievements, yes, but not in a way that turns ordinary milestones into spectacles. The next time you meet someone who's blind, try to see them as a whole person. Ask questions, listen to their story, and don't be afraid to challenge your own beliefs. Remember that respect, inclusion, and equality aren't just nice ideas. They're essential for building a better world. Thanks for spending this time with me today. I hope you've learned something new or maybe just seen things from a different angle. There's a lot more to say, but for now, let's remember that every person deserves to be seen, heard, and valued for who they are. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.
Rakshinda Zahid, IMT News, London.